Robert, this is Dr. Jester. I want to go over your paper on Buddhism. The assignment is fairly clear. You're to have three sections. To do a background section on the historical elements, history of the religion, subgroups, principal texts, major beliefs, and fundamental practices. Then in section 2, you would answer some questions. How does this religion commonly view God or ultimate reality of the meaning of creation, human nature, and purpose? What's the destiny of creation, of humanity, of each individual? And are there ways in which there are foundational elements of the religion consonant with a Christian worldview? And in what ways is the Christian worldview and this religion not consonant? And then there is a section 3, internal response. How can these truths and practices within the modern Christian tradition be better communicated and understood in the light of this religion, and how might the concepts or practices within the religion inspire you to modify or reinforce your own worldview? Now, I want to briefly look at your paper for just a minute. There's some problems that are appearing every single week. Every week I have mentioned these. I'm beginning to think that you're not reading any of my feedback, because these things appear almost every single week, and we're in about week 6 or 7 now, and they're still there. So here's some of the problems I'm seeing. First of all, this footnote is incorrectly placed. It should always be at the end of the sentence. You never want a footnote breaking up a sentence. You always want it at the end of the sentence to the information it's referring to. Second, you cannot have two number ones in a passage or an essay. You always number your footnotes sequentially. So there's a number 1, then a number 2, and a 3, and a 4, etc., etc. So you're not going to have two number 1s, two number 2s, two number 3s. It's always 1, 2, 3, 4. And they always go at the end of the sentence. Sorry about that. Let me get that off the screen. You've got this footnote here at the beginning of what appears to be a quote, and this quote is done incorrectly. So the footnote is placed incorrectly. And then second, you have a quotation that is not quoted. Every quotation, and we have mentioned this before, should always have quotation marks surrounding the exact words of the author. And there, I just lost that one. Let me bring it back. So here you want quotation marks right there at the end of that. Otherwise, someone reads that, they think that you're paraphrasing the source, and you're not. You're quoting the source. Without the quotation marks, that is considered a plagiarized quote. You don't want to be accused of that. I think we had some problems earlier in our class with that, and we get back to that same problem. It's creeping up again. And so, Robert, you've got to hear me on this. This is a very serious matter. When Turnitin shows that you've quoted a source and yet you have not provided the quotation marks, you can do this source all day long. That's fine. You need to. You're supposed to. But without the quotes, it's still incorrect and still considered a plagiarized quotation. Because when you have the quotes, it indicates that you have used those words from the source and you're citing it correctly. Got the same thing going on here. This entire element in red here is from the source without quotation marks. And again, two number 2s both should be, I don't know why there are two number 2s there. You should just have one, and it should be at the end of the quote, and you should have quotation marks. The document is a little bit hard to follow. You don't have it structured in a way that transitions from one subject to the other. This is a lot of general information, which is good. You've got to provide that. But when you get down into this section right here, you're talking about the subgroups. That's good. You need to talk about subgroups. Then you need to go into an evaluation section. You don't talk about that. You just talk about reincarnation. You're not answering those questions about human existence, creation, what happens to people, what is our destiny, and what is our purpose. You've also got a lot of first and second person thrown in. Again, that's not something you're supposed to be doing in your document. But none of these important questions you answer here. And then another quote. that stands out really strong. It's a long one. And all of the sources, you actually do have the sources listed in the footnotes. That's good, but it's still considered plagiarized. And on that basis, the document is going to have to be assigned to you. You're going to have to make corrections. And I would suggest, if you want a better grade, to pay attention to those things that I have just mentioned, your footnotes, where they need to go, quotation marks around any direct quotations, and your content is missing some vital elements. And make sure that a reader knows exactly how you're transitioning from one subject to the next. If you need to, place headers in your documents when you're going to be going from one section to the next. And one final thing I will mention, there's no clear thesis in this introduction here. You're not really telling, there's some general information. The reader can guess that you're going to be talking about Buddhism, but they don't know what you're going to say about that. So make sure you say this paper will discuss or evaluate the subgroups of Buddhism, the basic practices and beliefs of Buddhism, and how that relates to or does not relate to Christianity, and what can be learned from that. So provide a very specific thesis, okay? If you have any questions, I am available.